What's going on, YouTube? Today's video is going to be an overview of the M4A1 SOPMOD Block 2 weapon system. So for those of you unfamiliar, the SOPMOD Block 2 program was a program within US SOCOM that aimed to modernize both the weapon system itself as well as the accessories issued on the M4A1. So there were a few different versions of the upper receivers that were issued out as part of this program, as well as the accessories that were issued out. So I'll just give you a kind of surface level intro to these different Block 2 configurations and maybe hopefully give you guys some ideas of which one you want to clone if you decide to go that route. Because obviously these are all clone uppers. They are modeled after the real workhorses of US SOCOM. So starting off, before I get into this, I actually want to give a shout out to Jeffrey Gerwich, who has a great YouTube channel, and he is a very knowledgeable individual on weapon systems used within U.S. Special Forces, being a prior Green Beret himself. He has a great YouTube video on the history of the SOPMOD Block 2 program, which I will link down in the description. But what was interesting is in his video, he talked about how initially all of the uppers that they received for their M4s were these FSP uppers, which have a cutout in the Daniel Defense RIS-2 handguard that allowed them to retain the M4's front sight post. So it wasn't actually until later that he received his upper receiver that was the non-FSP version, which instead of the standard front sight base incorporated a Daniel Defense Mark 12 low-profile gas block. So this lightened up the gun a little bit and also gave you more real estate here. And a common complaint with the FSP version of the upper is that the front sight base gets really hot and you would often burn your hand on it whenever the weapon system got hot. Because along with being your front sight base, this is also your gas block. So a lot of heat gets transferred through that particular component. So pretty much all of the SOPMOD Block 2 uppers after a certain point would be this configuration with the non-FSP Daniel Defense RIS-2 rail. But like I said before, these were absolute workhorses within US SOCOM, and they were both very commonly seen in the global war on terror in the hands of cool guys doing very cool jobs. So one interesting thing I'll point out is that this upper, which I have on loan from a friend of mine, would be more of an Army SF setup, since it has the Surefire 4-prong flash hider, which would allow you to attach a Surefire SOCOM suppressor, and also a MATEC rear sight, which was more commonly in the Army's inventory and not so much the Marine Corps, which my other upper is built off of. This one also incorporates a PRI gas buster charging handle, which is built a little bit beefier in the back to block excess gas from spraying in the shooter's face when shooting suppressed. So this one is my personal upper with a few borrowed accessories on it. But like I said, this is more of a Marine Corps build. This one just uses a standard M4 charging handle. This uses the older Knights Armament NT4 suppressor mount. Since I have an NT4, I decided that I'm just going to share it between my Mark 18 upper and this one. And really, that's all that makes it a Marine Corps build. The fact that it's also a non-FSP would be accurate, because MARSOC apparently never got the FSP version of this rail. So if you want to build a MARSOC clone in particular, it would have to be this one. And then, of course, you have the CQBR, or Close Quarter Battle Receiver, also known as the Mark 18 Mod 1. It was called by a couple different names because there were different forms that this rifle was issued in. Sometimes it would be just an upper receiver, which was considered like an accessory to your 14.5-inch M4, and they would share one lower receiver. Although, as time progressed, it was more common to see these issued as an entire weapon system, which was dubbed the Mark 18 Mod 1. And so that's another difference that you get into with building one branch's gun versus another, is taking into consideration whether or not it would use a standard M4 lower, or would it have a lower like this one, which has more of the SOPMOD components like the SOPMOD stock, the CQD sling mount, Some of them would have ambi selectors, some of them wouldn't. Some would have Geisley triggers, some would have standard mil-spec triggers. But you can actually get really into the weeds on the details when talking about Block 2 stuff. Not all branches received the same parts and accessories. Not all branches received the exact same configurations. So stuff like that is what makes cloning fun to me, is figuring out stuff like that. But you will very commonly see uppers and clones out there of these rifles that are not exactly clone correct, but they use all clone correct components just from different branches. So I'll get off my soapbox, but these are probably the most commonly cloned service rifle in America, and there's a good reason for that. As I've already said a couple of times, these are a workhorse within US SOCOM. They're very commonly used. They work very, very well. Really the only complaint most people have with them is they're a little bit on the heavy side, you know, since they incorporate a quad rail rather than something like a Geisley M-Lock rail, which is on the replacement for these guns, the URGI. But again, they hold up very, very well to modern standards. I think personally they are one of the coolest looking standard issue service weapons that the US military has ever issued out. Really quickly, I'll talk about the accessories, because that's the other major component of the SOPMOD Block 2 program. There would be a variety of optics used within this program, starting with EOTechs, such as the EOTech 553, and then later the EXPS 3-0. You would also very commonly see this, the Elcan Spectre DR, which is a 1x4 prism optic, and in my opinion, one of the best combat optics ever made. It has the ability to switch between 4 power and 1 power with the flip of a switch. It's also night vision compatible. It has an illuminated reticle that you adjust with a knob. It has the ability to mount a piggyback red dot sight, in this case the Doctor optic. Later on, the EOTech MRDS would also be used, although in my opinion, I prefer the Doctor optic because it's not quite as fragile and doesn't have a plastic lens like the EOTech or Insight MRDS. They would come in a couple different shades of FDE depending on which generation they were. And the actual issued version of this optic would be dubbed the SU-230 or the SU-230 HD, which was the version that was hardened for use on the SCAR rifles. These rifles are actually really cool in the way that they adjust. So they actually use external adjustments rather than internal adjustments with an erector pillar and different things that adjust the lenses themselves on the inside of the optic. They actually just adjust the entire housing of the optic. So you have your elevation knob here, which you can lock into place with this little silver tab here using the tip of a bullet. You could lock it down so it doesn't move. And then you have your windage adjustment over here. And lastly, I should mention, they do have some iron sights that are built in on top. In my experience, these are rarely ever close enough to point of impact to really be all that useful. But it's cool that they're there. They could work for very close up, I suppose. But I never did use them when I've owned these optics in the past. Moving on to the other accessories in the kit, we have, of course, the Insight PEC 15. Later on, these would be phased out by the LA5 version, which had a more powerful illuminator and was hardened for, again, use on rifles like the SCAR. We have the Insight SU-233, also known as the M3X. This was the original flashlight for the Block 2 program, which was phased out for the WMX200. This flashlight was not inherently IR compatible. It required the use of an IR filter that you attach to it to be night vision compatible, and it also had a incandescent bulb which had a pretty pitiful output. This one's been replaced with an LED head, and so it is much brighter, but again, these were pretty quickly phased out for the WMX200, which was LED. It was 200 lumens and worked similar to a Surefire vampire light where you just twist the head to switch modes. And then, of course, with this being all kind of a system from Insight Technologies, you got the dual pressure switch. This would allow you to activate independently your laser or your flashlight as it plugs into both of them. And of course, different components would be changed out later on, and as the Block 2 program was moved out, the URGI moved in and kept some parts from the Block 2 program, mainly the optics, the suppressors, and then as the Block 2 program progressed, and especially as you get to the URGI kind of era, you see a lot of those Insight flashlights phased out for Surefire scout lights. So as I touched on earlier in the video, there's a lot of different variants of, there's a lot of different setups that you would see Block 2 rifles in. There's a huge variety of configurations for these rifles, and they go from very early rifles to more modern, up-to-date rifles. Because these were used for so long, there's just a wide range of parts that you can use on these guns that would be considered clone correct, per se. So anyway, I think that's about all for this video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. I'm more than happy to answer them. If you want to see more of these rifles, I'll be posting some better quality photos of them on my Instagram page, so go follow me there at inferior_rifles. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the video. That helps out me with YouTube's algorithm and helping bring more people to the channel. So I appreciate everyone that has watched up until this point, and those of you who made it to the end of the video, thank you, and I will see you in the next one.